Good morning, everyone. This is Father Nate, missionary priest in Italy, and thanks for joining us today, February 7th, on No Greater Delight, our podcast on Marian feasts and Marian meditations. So today, we start off with the image of Our Lady of Grace in the Abbey of Saint-Sauve in Montreal-sur-Mer. So, among the many different miraculous images, there's one in the Church of the Carmelites in Vienna, entitled Mary, the Mother of Grace, or Our Lady of Grace, also known as Our Lady of the Bowed Head. And it has this name because in 1610, a Carmelite, Dominic of Jesus Mary, found among the different things in the old Orthodox Church this image of an oil painting of the Mother of God, dust covered and it looked somewhat torn, right? So taking it into his hands, he shook off the dust and knelt down to venerate it with great devotion, right? He had the picture kind of cleaned up. He put it on a shelf in his cell, where he made it the object of his devotion. Now, one night, while he was praying fervently before the picture, he noticed some dust had settled on it. So he had his old woolen handkerchief, and he dusted it off and apologized to Our Lady. And to his great surprise, the face of the Mother of God appeared to take on life. And smiling sweetly at him, she bowed her head, which thereafter remained inclined. Right? So Dominic was worried that he had misseen it, but Our Lady assured him that his requests would be heard. Right? He could ask for them and not to worry. Right? And then Dominic begged that all who venerated Mary in that image might obtain what they requested. In reply, the Virgin gave him this assurance: all who devoutly venerate me in this picture and take refuge to me will have their request granted, and I will obtain from them many graces. But especially will I hear their prayers for the relief and deliverance of the souls in purgatory. Right? So after the death of Dominic, the original painting was lent to Prince Maximilian of Bavaria. He gave it to the Discalced Carmelite in Munich in 1631. They gave it to the Emperor Ferdinand II of Austria and his wife Eleanor. And then after Ferdinand's death, Eleanor entered the Carmelite convent in Vienna and took the picture with her. Right? And so then it kind of went back and forth to different places. Today it's in the Monastery Church of Vienna. On September 27th, 1931, it was solemnly crowned by Pope Pius XI. Its 300th anniversary of arrival in Vienna. Next, we're going to jump down to Italy, and we recall that in 1783, there were a great number of earthquakes in the first days of February, this in Calabria, right? So one celebration we have is the Madonna del Rosario in Soriano Calabro, Bibo Valentia, Calabria in Italy. Right? So it was a very big earthquake in the first days of February in 1783. They said that it radically changed not only the face of the territory, but the very identity and conscience of the Calabrian people. Right? So, but oftentimes these people show their devotion and thanksgiving to Our Lady who had protected them. Right? So one of these expressions takes place in Soriano Calabro, the epicenter of one of the strongest seismic shocks. Right? It was a 6.5 on the Mercalli scale. I don't know if that's the Richter scale or what, but anyways, it was big. And so it destroyed a number of the convent complexes, but this miraculous painting of St. Dominic and an image of the Blessed Virgin Mary of the Holy Rosary were found intact, right? So that was very important for them. And not only that, even earlier, they had experience with Our Lady and the Rosary, right? Because in 1638 and 1659 in Soriano, they noticed that these people who were very devoted to the Blessed Virgin of the Rosary, they noticed that those particular towns had less catastrophic effects of the earthquake, right? So this is, for them, it's a very important celebration. Same thing or similar thing goes to in Conflenti, in Catanzaro, in Calabria, Italy. They celebrate Maria Santissima delle Grazie della Quercia di Visora, which is the Most Holy Mary of the Graces of the Oak of Visora, right? And again, we remember that this is because of these huge earthquakes that took place in 1783, which took place in these first days of February, right? So what happened? Well, again, it was on February 7th, they had this huge earthquake. And so on this night of terror, the people of Conflenti left their homes and went to the shrine of Our Lady, asking her for help. They had a procession through the streets, invoking the protection of Maria Santissima di Visora. And almost at the end, a very strong shock was felt. There was no damage, though, just a lot of fear, right? So when they started hearing the news of what happened in neighboring towns, though, they were very, very grateful because they said, no, this is a miracle. We've been saved. And so for this reason, every year they have a procession of the statue of Our Lady on February 7th, and they fast on bread and water. Since 1997, that is, the Madonna della Quercia di Visora has been the patroness of Conflenti, right? So still today, there's the traditional procession. If we go a little bit further in Italy to Santissima Maria Vergine della Porta, which would be like Most Holy Virgin Mary of the Gate or the Door, in Guastalla, Reggio Emilia, Emilia-Romagna, Italy, the feast commemorates the miraculous healing in 1693 of an injured blind man who was praying before the image, right? So the first miracle that we have, the one that really began the devotion of the faithful, took place on February 7th, 1693. Right? Now we have to understand a little bit about the history. So it's a small image of Our Lady was painted on the wall, on the wall of the door of this place, right? On the right side for people exiting. So they say the image dates back to 1646 or maybe 1624. They don't really know, right? It was sort of it must have been at the barracks, because it says that there's it was ordered first off by the sergeant of the guards, and then unfortunately, a lot of different patrol groups came through. And so it sort of just kind of it became a place where people threw their trash, and nobody really took it seriously. There were fires lit by the guards at night, so the image became black. And so at a certain time, a certain Giambattista Zagni, who remembered it because he had actually spent some time in the guardhouse, every so often he would go there. He was an older man, but he would try to clean it up and, do the best he could. So the walls of the city were entirely destroyed by Spanish troops, but it was only that gate that was left, that door, right? Probably because it had a certain elegance to it. So what happened? Well, he became very old and weak and in sight, right? And so on a cold winter's evening, towards the end of January 1693, as he left the city to go towards his home, probably due to his eye problems, it was icy, he suddenly collapsed in a very deep ditch. So this poor old man suffered bruises. And also, he had some big problems with his eyes. So what happened? Well, because he was really devoted to Our Lady, he bought a candle and asked his friend, who worked not far from there, to light it in front of the image, right? And so he did. The friend went very nicely and lit the candle. And Zagni immediately not only recovered from the after effects of his accident, but also he recovered his sight. So obviously they'd become quite famous because of that miracle. And many people started going there. For instance, his friend, who had brought the candle there, went and lit a candle to ask for grace of the two children who had been suffering and sick. And, they were completely healed. So another man, Domenico Bertarelli, was so crippled that he couldn't stand on his legs, and he had to drag himself on his hands and knees. When he learned of these events, he decided to go there. So Sunday, February 8th, 1693, they took him by cart to the gate, right? So people had come to venerate the image. And so the man had been, he prayed and dragged himself on all fours to the image. After a few moments, he stood up and started walking, right? Perfectly healed, right? There's many of these different things, many examples of miracles found there, right? So that is what we're celebrating today in the Marian world, February 7th. For today's Marian meditation, taken from the book by Father Ildefonso Villar, we conclude meditation 34. And if you recall, all of these meditations concern the Magnificat, Mary's prayer after she visits St. Elizabeth. And today we consider the words, "Behold, from this day forward, all generations will call me blessed." And this is just a confirmation of the foregoing. The humble soul enamors the heart of God. God spares no means to raise him and exalt him. How much God has exalted all his saints! But he has done so especially with Mary. Who of us more humble than she? On account of that, all generations will call her blessed. She humbles herself, and God exalts her. Watch this divine competition. God vying with Mary. Mary is determined to humble herself before God, and God is determined to raise her above all the angels to the very highest secrets of divinity. Nobody as humble as Mary, and nobody as exalted as her. If you study her humility, you will get lost, since you cannot reach the depths of her self-abasement. If you meditate on her exaltation, you cannot follow, since here also our insight fails, and the mind cannot pursue her in her flight to God. What must then humility be? What does God see in humility which makes it the essential condition to please him? If Mary had not rendered herself a handmaid, she would not now be the Queen and Mother of God. The conclusion is that as pride and vanity are unreasonable, insofar as they have no foundation whatsoever, so they are also useless and fruitless. The proud soul achieves nothing. The humble achieves all. It is then in your best interest to work at the acquisition of humility and at getting rid of any trace of that revolting pride. Saint Bernard was right when he said that the Magnificat was Mary's ecstasy of humility. Humility was the root of all the other grandeurs and marvels. Lastly, think of the prophecy contained in these words, "All generations will call me blessed." The future is unknown, and yet she speaks of it with the utmost certainty. How consoling it is for us to find that these words of Mary have been fulfilled to the very letter. Count the titles of Mary. Number the shrines and churches raised in her honor. Does not every church and chapel contain a Marian altar? Is there any town, big or small, which does not cherish one of her images? Which does not celebrate her feasts with joy and splendor? Think of the month of Our Lady. Think of the feast of the Assumption, of the Immaculate Conception. Recall the principal solemnities of Our Lady. Watch Christian people flocking to the feet of our Heavenly Mother. Then climb up to heaven and contemplate the saints, acknowledging that their sanctity is Mary's gift. See the angels who, together with mankind, never cease to call her blessed. How magnificently has Mary's prophecy been fulfilled. For today's reading from The Admirable Heart of Mary by St. John Eudes, we read the conclusion of chapter 5, entitled Wisdom and Truth of God Mirrored in the Admirable Heart of Mary. Again, this entire section of the book, is about how Mary's heart is a mirror of the divine perfections. Such are some of the effects wrought by divine wisdom in this admirable heart. We shall now contemplate in it the workings of the eternal truth of God. Divine veracity stamps its image most excellently on the Blessed Virgin's heart. As God is paramountly the God of all truth, and calls himself the Holy and True One, that's from the book of Revelation 3:7, so it is the heart of the Mother of God filled with truth. Only of the heart of Mary can it be said, speaking of simple creatures, that truth always filled it, because it was the only heart ever completely faithful to its divine rule and exemplar, the heart of God himself. Give me all the hearts of the children of Adam, and I shall repeat of them all the words of the Holy Spirit. Their heart is vain. Right? This is Psalm 5, verse 10. For none will be found who were always faithful and truthful to God. Only of the heart of the mother of him who is essential and uncreated truth could it be said that from the first to the last moment of her life, the heart of Mary is holy and truthful, because it always conforms to God's eternal decrees. Whatever was done in her, says St. Jerome, was all purity and simplicity, sanctity and truth. Furthermore, as God is infallible in his judgments and knowledge and can commit no error, knowing and judging all things in his own truth, that's a quote from Psalm 95, verse 13, so also he gave the Blessed Virgin Mary a knowledge of the truth which enlightened all her judgments. Her heart was ever filled and possessed by the Spirit of truth, which guided her with the infallible light of faith that can truly be called a participation of the divine truth. Finally, as all the actions and words of God's are imbued with truth itself, in like manner were the words and actions of God's mother always truthful. That is, they were always conformable to the holiness, perfection, and truth of the deeds and words of God. This was because they stemmed from a heart most perfect, holy, and truthful. And the Son of God himself teaches us that man's heart is the principle of all his thoughts, words, and actions, whether they be good or bad. All these considerations make us understand that the Holy Heart of Mary is the living portrait of the wisdom and veracity of God, given to us that we may invoke her guidance against the folly, deceit, and falsehood of the flesh and of the world.
Hello, and we hope that you enjoyed listening to our Marian podcast. In the spirit of Saint Bernard of Clairvaux, we say to you that there is no greater delight than to spread the devotion of Our Lady. We hope you share these sentiments and encourage you greatly to share with a loved one. Know that you are always in our prayers, and we ask that you keep us in yours. God bless.